Planning a 9/11 terror trial on U.S. soil is certainly becoming more and more difficult for the Obama administration. We have seen protests over the plans to hold it in lower Manhattan. And while the White House isn't ruling out New York quite yet, it is exploring other options on where to try 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 others suspected terrorists. What's next? Joining me now, Republican Senator from Utah, Robert Bennett, also on the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Happy to do it.
Good morning to you. There's so much talk about this. It just seems that everybody has an opinion about where these trials should be held. What's your feeling?
I don't think there's any question as to where they should be held. They should be held at Guantanamo. I've been to Guantanamo. I've seen the courtrooms there, seen the facilities there, as far as the ability to hold a trial in a proper kind of setting. It's clearly there. And that's where that's where these kinds of people ought to be held, and that's where they ought to be tried. The administration, I think, particularly Eric Holder, has made a huge mistake in saying they ought to be treated like common criminals in the American justice system rather than enemy combatants, which is what they really are.
Senator, as an attorney, I understand the difference between the military tribunal case and the civilian court case, particularly when it comes to classified information that will play a role in prosecuting these defendants. And I know the military tribunal offers more of that information to remain classified. They do get legal counsel, and we have seen some successful prosecutions in civilian federal court. So what argument can be made that it must be in a military tribunal, and why do you like the Guantanamo location, since those could be held at other bases?
Well, this is a different kind of criminal, a different kind of defendant, if you will. And you go to Guantanamo and spend some time talking to the people who are guarding them and getting the history of what goes on there. And this is not a bank robber. This is not even a serial killer of the kind that we have seen tried in American courts. These people have an agenda that transcends the question of guilt or innocence. And they want a stage on which they can play out their agenda, which they can get publicity for what it is they want to do. There were efforts just shortly before I got to Guantanamo, when I went there, of people hoping for an overreaction on the part of the guards so that someone would be killed. They tried to stimulate some kind of incident where the guards there would respond with overwhelming force and one of the prisoners would be killed. That's their idea of the very best thing that could happen, because it would produce significant world opinion for their point of view. That's not the kind of criminal you want tried in a standard New York courtroom.
But, Senator, this administration wants terrorists to be tried in civilian court. And Eric Holder, the Attorney General, made this decision, and the President left it to him to make that decision. And I remember talking to former Attorney General Michael Mukasey, who was very much against the decision. If the Attorney General isn't in charge of making that decision, then who should be? Because we know there are many people who feel it shouldn't be in lower Manhattan, it shouldn't be in civilian court, but there are those who feel that it should.
This is not a decision you should leave to the Attorney General alone. The Secretary of Defense clearly should be consulted. The Director of National Intelligence clearly should be consulted. The Director of the CIA, frankly, I think it wouldn't hurt to pick up the phone and call General McChrystal, the commander on the ground. Because one of the things we found in Guantanamo, as people have been released there, decision being made there, this person is no longer dangerous, and then we discover from the commanders on the ground that person shows up in the fight again. And turned out the judgment that they're no longer dangerous was not true. So to say, well, the Attorney General gets to decide this all by himself, it's an abrogation, I think, of the overall responsibility of the administration to talk to everybody who has an interest in this decision. And there are a lot more people that have an interest than just the Attorney General.
And, Senator, I will differentiate earlier terrorist cases that were handled in federal civilian court. Those terrorists had some connection or nexus to the United States. They had been in this country before for one reason or another. That is not the case with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who did not have a connection. So I understand. Do you think the Obama administration, before I let you go, will change its policy then? And could this be the element that allows them to change their mind about closing Guantanamo?
Well, it's very clear the president has missed his deadline of closing Guantanamo. He promised that virtually on inaugural day a year ago, that it would be closed by the end of the year. The end of the year has come and gone, and it's still open and operating. And I think the administration is undoubtedly going to backpedal quite significantly. There's even conversation on Capitol Hill as to what this might do to Eric Holder's career and whether or not he becomes the first casualty of the Obama administration. You saw the letter signed not only by 3 Republicans but 3 Democrats saying they didn't like this. So the vote of no confidence, I think, will be clearly coming from the Congress. Whether it will be strong enough to turn the policy around or not, I don't know. But right now, there's every sign of the classic let's back away from the Attorney General and let him be the only one hanging out there. That's a classic political move of an administration who discovers it's made a mistake and they're trying to look for a fall guy.
Well, he was given great authority in making this decision. The president wasn't even in the country. He was in Japan at the time that he had the press conference, Eric Holder. We're going to look at that issue later with a former federal prosecutor. I appreciate your time, Senator. Very nice to talk to you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Have a good day.